Welcome you to another Facebook and YouTube Live. And my name is Keith, and I'm the founder of Keith RN. And the business that I've created and the ministry that I have is a passion to strengthen and transform nursing education so that we can close this gap between academia and practice so our students develop the clinical judgment for safe practice and licensure. And it's really my pleasure to serve your needs and to really empower you as educators to be a part of the needed change. It's great to be with you tonight. I want to let you know who's out there tonight. I would love to just put your name in the chat. It's already going to be there, your first name, and just let me know who's out there tonight and just who's with us so we can just kind of give a shout out as needed to those who are with us. And if you're checking out this live stream for the first time, like I've said before, I really want to shepherd, support, and encourage nurse educators. It is a hard world right now to be in nursing education, to be in nursing practice, the pandemic, in civility. There's some real challenges out there. And it's like, my goal is to help make your job easier and to support you, encourage you, and provide you with some of the tools and resources as well as practical strategies to help you bring innovative active learning to be part of the needed change to transform and strengthen nursing education. And this live stream is recorded. It lives forever on my Facebook page, Keith RN, Think Like a Nurse. If you go to the video section of my Facebook page, like my page, and you'll get notified every 2 weeks when we go live, it's going to be there. You can click it, share the link. If you found this conversation tonight that I'm going to have with Martha helpful or any other content, please share it and get the word out. I'm also the admin for the Facebook group, Teachers Transforming Nursing Education. And that's a supportive community. If you're not already a part of that, please, it's a closed educator group. Throw your hat in the ring. Let me answer the questions so I know that you're a nurse educator and love to get you inside. And, I would just like to kind of, with the admin group, we get tons of questions. And I just want to take just a moment to answer a really important question that's relevant for every nurse educator. And this was asked just the other day. And it was an educator talking about the next gen NCSBN clinical judgment measurement model. And she asked, are programs omitting the nursing process language and only teaching the 6 steps of the next generation model? Or are programs teaching both? How are you adjusting your curriculum to prepare for next gen? And I just like to share just very briefly my thoughts on that question. Number one, nursing process is always going to be relevant to nursing practice. The 5 steps of nursing process are really embedded in each of the 6 steps of the NCSBN model. And we need to remember this. The NCSBN model of clinical judgment that they'll be using is an evaluation model. It is not a model for practice. It is meant to evaluate clinical judgment, not nursing practice. And even the NCSBN has come out and said that the next gen model, you don't have to teach it directly. And I would say, please do not. Because we have something called the academic practice gap that's already entrenched. Therefore, let's change that by shrinking it, because practice doesn't care about the NCSBN model. It's an evaluation model. Let's remember that. So really 2 simple things, nursing process and Chris Tanner's clinical judgment model. This is a framework that Tanner developed in 2006 out of 200 plus research articles. It is a practice-based model of clinical judgment that helps really dovetail with nursing process. Now, I don't have time to go in depth, but I'm really amazed that a lot of educators aren't more familiar with Tanner's model. It's also got its fingerprints all over the next gen framework. So I really, the 6 steps of the NCSBN model correlate with the 4 steps of Tanner. Now, I've got a blog that I've got, Amy, you can throw that in the chat, called How Do You Spell Clinical Judgment? And it's TANNER. And that's Chris Tanner. And so that blog will help you understand Tanner's framework, implement it, and actually the secret sauce of my clinical reasoning case studies that educators have found really helpful that I've written and posted on keithrn.com really capture the essence of Tanner's framework. So if we're teaching nursing process, we're teaching Tanner's model of clinical judgment, our students will be well prepared for next gen. We don't have to fret. And again, just using educational best practices, making learning active with these case studies and other resources that emphasize nursing process and Tanner's reasoning framework of noticing, interpreting, responding, and reflecting will prepare your students for practice as well. And I've got a website, keithrn.com, where I've got a COVID-19 case study, a clinical reasoning case study. See for yourself how powerful and practical this tool can be and make your life that much easier as it relates to nursing education. But I wanted to just highlight really quickly that just a couple weeks ago, we had Dr. Cynthia Clark, a well-known, internationally known nurse educator who's done a body of work on civility and incivility. If you missed that video, that's on my Facebook page. I'd love you to check it out because she talked about the importance of civility, which is really a culture of respect that we desperately need in nursing education. The importance of also, and I loved her close, leaving a legacy. And she really challenged us last time to look at our life, look at our body of work, look at the way we're living. What are we leaving behind to our students? What are we leaving behind to those that care about us and love us? And she really challenged me. And I bought a book on Amazon called Your Legacy, Designing a Life that Honors God, Blesses Others, and Brings Joy to Your Own Soul. And you know, three characteristics I just want to encourage you all to consider is live a life of intention and purpose with everything you do. Make it actionable, but more importantly, pursue it with love for your students, love for others, as well as a passion. Let students see your passion for nursing. Let them see your love and your care for them as individuals and for those around you in your circle. You know, your legacy is more than what you do in nursing education. It really embodies everything you do in your personal and professional life. Well, let's get started. Tonight, I am excited to have an innovative and really a kindred spirit who's creative like me, has developed numerous ideas to make learning active, but really more important, just as important, keeps it real and develops the thinking that our students need for safe practice and licensure. And her name is Martha Johnson, and she's a nursing instructor in Wisconsin, owner of Breakout RN. And she was frustrated like me with TMI slide presentations, 3-hour lectures, and she began to say there has to be a better way and developed and began experimenting with best practice active learning strategies. As a result, she, like myself, found that students became engaged with your content when they become a part of it. They were excited to come to class. Test scores improved. And she shares her strategies at the Idea Bank. And I want you to kind of check out her website, breakoutrn.com. And she's got a little header there called Idea Bank, a blog with practical, easy to implement activities for nursing instructors that are free. We're going to be talking about some of these powerful strategies that she's developed and is going to share with us tonight. But one active learning technique that Martha's really passionate about is escape rooms. And based on the Facebook group, that is a passionate topic and it's a hot topic and educators love it. Martha has set out to help educators create physical in your traditional class or virtual or blended escape rooms in their classrooms. And so I am really excited to have Martha with me tonight. And Martha, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us tonight here on Facebook Live with Keith RN.
Hi, Keith. Thank you so much for having me. That was such a nice introduction.
Well, it's all true.
Yeah.
And you know, you're younger than I am, but you've got this. Yeah, as I've gotten to learn more about your story, your journey, Martha, you really have a similar passion to not just really change, how we teach nursing, but more importantly, you are willing to share that information and knowledge with other educators who really are in need. As I learned 9 years ago when I began my journey, we need the tools, we need strategies, and how to implement needed change is really that bridge that we need to bring academia and practice together. So I just want to, it's just a pleasure. I don't think a lot of educators know about Martha Johnson, but by the end of tonight, and a little word of mouth, I want to see your website light up and get some traffic, because educators need to know about the work you're doing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those ideas, I want to share them because I'm speaking to my former self, my younger self, when I was new, and I wish that I had some resources and some tools that were practical, easy to implement, and that were small. I couldn't take on, a huge project. I just wanted bite-sized pieces. So that's really what the blog or the idea bank came to light.
Well, before we go too down deep, before we get started, I love to get educators' journey and story, because, you went into nursing and you went into nursing education fairly young. And so, I love having younger educators. Not that we all have to be 50 or 60 years old, but it's like we're about 55 for a median in nursing education. And so I would just love to just briefly share your story. What attracted you to nursing, and how did that transition to nursing education come about for you?
Sure. I did not always want to be a nurse. I did not even know a nurse when I went to nursing school, but I always had an interest in the human body, and I went to college. I kind of floundered around. I did Spanish and business, and I say that nursing kind of found me, and it really gave me a clear path. So before I knew it, I was in nursing school, and I had a wonderful teacher. Her name was Rose, and she was clinically excellent. She was great at the bedside, but she was also kind. And she showed me a lot of respect, even though I was new. And I always thought, like, when I'm a nurse, one day I am going to be like that. And I am going to treat students and new nurses with respect and kindness. And that's always been kind of one of my core values, that I want to get rid of that mean instructor persona and really still holding students to high expectations and communicating that, but at the same time, being respectful and showing them kindness.
Absolutely. And so where did that journey take you then, from clinical practice into nursing education? Where did that kind of bridge, and how did that transition come about for you?
Yeah, so I practiced for a few years, and I started taking on students. When there was a group on the floor, I would always grab them, and I really enjoyed working with students. So it kind of became a natural transition to go back to school for education. And I started just teaching clinically. And then when I was in grad school, I did my student teaching in clinical, and I did a study abroad program. And I love being a teacher.
Mm-hmm. So it's a passion. Yeah. It's kind of like, and I think, even though you're a shy person, and I'm really an introvert, believe it or not, I am an introvert, but when I'm in front of people teaching or presenting to educators, even Facebook Live, I come alive. I can just it's like that passion.
You can turn it on. Yeah.
That's right. It's there for a reason, Martha. So it's obviously a talent and a gift that you've been given, and you're using that. And so how long have you been an educator then? What is that? Because you were an ER nurse, you were in the med-surg float pool, I think. Then you, like me, said, I like the ambiguity of ER practice. And I just latched onto it, and you really settled there for about 5 years. And then you went into education. So how long have you been teaching in that role? What's kind of that, how long has that been for you?
Yeah, I started out in the float pool. So variety of patients. Then I floated one day to the ER and I was sold.
Yeah.
I wanted to be there so bad. So I transferred and I spent about 5 years there. And then I was going to grad school at the time and teaching some clinical at the time. And then now I teach full time. I'm finishing up my 9th year of teaching.
Wow, good for you. And you know what? I've got one of your students, Mary Jaden, says she's here today in the chat with a lot of smiles. And so if I got the chat there, you know, Mark, you can see
I know Mary
already out there. You know, Amy says your website's amazing. So impressed. And so just kind of own some of that excellence, Martha. I know that you kind of struggle sometimes with just kind of wanting to put yourself out there, but you've done that. And so thank you for all that you're doing. So tell me this. Tell me about your transition as a new clinic, as a new educator from coming from practice in the ER, like myself, into academia. What was your greatest struggles or challenges that you faced? And then what did you do to begin to address them and to really do some of the strategies and the things that you began on your journey several years ago that you then put into your website just recently? So I'd like to let's start with your challenges, because your challenges, I can guarantee, are not unique to Martha. And so what were they and what did you do to get some traction over those, I call them splinters in our brains, that were really not okay, that were painful or challenging? So I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, so when I was a new educator, I had zero classroom experience. Like I said, I did my clinical or my student teaching, I guess, in some different areas, and I never spent time in front of a classroom. So I was fortunate in my first semester of teaching. My dean allowed me to observe the theory class that I was teaching. So I got to sit in on the class with another instructor. So when it came time for me to teach my first theory class, I did what she had done and what I had been through when I was in nursing school, which was a 3-hour lecture.
Oh, and that's a long time to keep students engaged, Martha. I don't know. How did that go?
It didn't go well. I thought I was super prepared. I had a script. I had very nice charts. I had great PowerPoints, what I thought were great PowerPoints, but it was painful. It was painful for me, and it was painful for my students. I could tell. And I knew in that first lecture that something had to change. So I started just researching and reading about active learning or flipped classroom. And I talked to one of my mentors about it. I had a teacher that mentored me, and she said, if you want to do this, just start small. Start with one activity. Yeah. And you don't have to revamp the whole class for next semester. Just start with something small. So that's what I did. I started with one activity, and every semester I added something or revised something or implemented something new. And now I'm at a point where I have, a completely flipped classroom, and it's amazing. I love teaching class now because the students are engaged. There's not so much pressure on me as the introvert that I am as well. So
practically speaking, Martha, what did that journey look like? So 9 years ago, when you began teaching, your website was just in the last year. So this is a new thing. So you've been you've been experimenting like a mad scientist with active learning. And so what did those early things that you did though early on, because it sounds like what you've done is really implement the wisdom of the Chinese proverb that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with your first step and then a second step. And you kind of slowly began that journey. So I would just like to know, and I'm sure the audience would like to know, just what were those early steps that are really easily actionable that any educator listening to this live stream could get enough information to begin to kind of get your, like osmosis, to kind of get in their way. What did you do as you read? What resonated with you, and what were some of those early strategies? And then we're going to get into some of the ones that you've developed on your idea bank. So I just like to know, before there was an idea bank, what did you do, Martha? What was some of those 2 or 3 things that really, you saw the responsiveness, you saw the engagement, you saw the light bulbs go on, but what were they?
Yeah, one of them is in the idea bank. One of the first ones that I experimented with was that I noticed a trend of students having difficulty deciding whether or not to hold medications. And I wanted to, so in post-conference, I started in clinical because I was teaching clinical as an adjunct, and I implemented that activity in post-conference rather than having a discussion that when everyone's tired and their brains are kind of fried, that we did this more interactive activity around medications, and I make them give a very solid yes or no answer. They have to be decisive about it. So that was one of the first activities that I did. But I think when educators are looking to start this, the easiest place is in the warm up for class. Those first 10 minutes are when students' attention span is at its peak.
Yeah.
And if you can do something interactive just for that 10, 15 minutes in the beginning of class, you're off to a great start. I think of...
What was that? So what were some of the icebreakers that you found to be effective, that your students resonated with?
Well, some of it is group work. Some of it is discussion. It can be really simple. Like, we're going to talk about the empathy map is one that is very simple, warm up activity. There's a pain activity that I have that I just show images of x-rays that are super painful injuries. And we talk about, or discuss with your group how you would approach this patient, or how this patient might be feeling, or what you can anticipate for the patient. Yeah. So those activities in the beginning of class just get their mind kind of out of wherever they were before, the cafeteria, bringing their kids to daycare if they were coming from work, and get them present in class.
And what you're doing, Martha, when you look at Dr. Benner's work with the Carnegie Foundation, educating nurses, a call for radical transformation that really rocked my world as an educator about 9 years ago, when I began to teach and saw that gap in disengaged students and too much information, bringing clinical to the classroom and bringing clinical realities into our classroom, integrating the two. And what you're saying, like with images from practice, they can be x-rays, they can be wounds, they can be, go to Google Images, and there's no shortage of medical images that we can use with your content. And then you've got a wound, you've got an x-ray relevant to your content, there's a patient behind that. There's a clinical reality, there's a family member, and you can do like the what ifs and other things to just kind of hook them in bringing clinical to class with images. Did you ever bring stories into your classroom from your practice? The ER is rich with stories, Martha. And so did you bring your stories? Because a story can hook your students. That's what I did in my class. I just brought in clinical stories relevant to my topic. And my students were like, they'll forget a lot of your content, but a good story can leave a lifetime impact on practice, for good or for bad. Did you bring your stories in, or did you bring some of those stories from the ER into your classroom as well?
Definitely. And I think, like you said, story is one of those things that is ingrained in the human brain. And if you can weave story into your work, into your class, that you can really have an impact on students.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Martha. And so, we'll talk about the would you give this medication? That'll be coming up shortly. But what I'd like to know, Martha, is that what made you a busy educator, a mom of young children, to basically develop a website and then create these blogs or idea banks and even other resources that educators can purchase to help them develop escape rooms. What was your why to really, that takes a lot of work and a little bit of income to make that happen, but you did it. And kind of like myself, I did the same thing, which is why there's a lot of cool synergy and very similarities in our story in different ways. But it's like, what was your why to do that and do that extra work when you're already busy?
Well, I think part of it was I was speaking to or coaching my younger self. When I was new, I didn't come into necessarily a culture of sharing, and we didn't, nurse educators, sometimes you can kind of hold tight to your activities, and I really wanted to share what I had figured out, what I had taken time to learn about, and what I had experimented with. There's no sense in me keeping that to myself. It was working. It was working and it was engaging, and I just wanted to offer those tools to other teachers.
Okay. And so let's talk about those tools, Martha. Let's start with the, this is a question that I would love to get in the chat, and throw your question. This is a question I want to ask you all who are with us. We've got a great audience tonight, Martha. Can caring be taught? Can caring and empathy be taught? Or do you just have to have it like Mother Teresa? If you're not Mother Teresa, you can't be caring. Can we teach that skill? It's a soft skill. It's part of holistic care. But you have an activity in your idea bank on your website that educators can see. You can go to it right now. Kind of split screen it. Don't tune us out yet. Wait till we're done. But it's called the empathy map. And so tell us, Martha, about the empathy map. What is kind of the inspiration of that? And kind of tell us how we can implement that. I'm assuming it's more of a clinical activity, but you set the stage and tell us more about it.
Yes, I think caring can be taught. I think empathy can be taught. I think, well, first, I think you have to understand empathy is seeking or working to understand someone else's feelings. It's not sympathy. Sympathy is feeling the same way. You can't teach someone how to feel something, but empathy is, that lifelong learning process that you can instill in students, that you work to understand your patient's experience. And I think that can be taught. I think one of the ways we can teach it is through modeling empathetic behavior. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but we can be respectful to students and we can be kind. There's no reason to be, to show incivility or to have that mean instructor mentality to intimidate, that we can be empathetic to students' situations. And I think modeling that behavior is one way. This empathy map, though, is a little more tactile, I guess, that it's actually a marketing tool that, businesses may use to map out their customers' thoughts and get, figure out why they buy things. But I think it
translates experience. What is it that they need? Like educators, what are their pain points?
Yes.
And empathizing and understanding that.
But I think it translates really well to nursing and teaching empathy because it just asks the questions, and it's just a simple grid that is what the patient says, what the patient thinks, what the patient does, and what the patient feels. And it's just, again, seeking to understand how they're, having that empathy towards them and their situation. So it's just, and it's like any skill, it can be practiced. You just have to practice it. So.
Absolutely. And so would you use that more in the clinical setting, Martha? So that idea bank is the empathy map and understanding your patient's lived experiences with those 4 quadrants. Is that, I'm assuming that sounds like more of a clinical experience.
I think you could add it onto any clinical paperwork or, a care plan. I use it in class. And if you do look at the blog, I have like the patient scenario that I've used before. And again, I just use it as like that warm-up activity. I think of lecture like exercise. Sometimes you need like a warm-up and then a cool down at the end. So
Yeah.
I think it's a nice warm-up activity to kind of get their minds thinking about the patients that we're going to talk about.
And while you were saying that, Martha, I just had an idea of putting two and two together. Like my mind is overactive like yours. You got way too many ideas and not enough days, not enough hours. But it's like you could take, a photograph of a person's face, of sadness, of grief, and this and that, and you could, that is your patient for this XYZ in your theory class. Taking the image of a patient's emotions, whatever it might be, and then using the empathy map to kind of flesh it out. And you can even do a scenario. You can kind of create your own little scenario about the patient just found out that they were, got this diagnosis of breast cancer stage 4, and it's a patient who's crying, Use the empathy map, and you have an image, a brief context. Would that work? I'm just kind of, making this as you're talking.
I think that's a great idea. And I think especially for those kinds of situations, because if you're a new nurse, that can be uncomfortable to encounter as well, a patient who just had a bad diagnosis and is upset. So I think it's helpful to expose students to those kind of situations before they see them in practice.
Absolutely. And, you developed one of your, I think your most recent idea bank, and you send out emails, Martha, so people can go to your website, sign up to get your email list, and you'll send, when you have a new idea bank, it goes right to their inbox. And I got one a couple weeks ago on clinical decision cards. And I really like that. It's a free download of a PDF document that you can make your own little clinical cards. And what I love about it is that it's problem recognition. It's talking about problems that our patients can develop. And you can create this really nice deck. You can laminate it at Kinko's, wherever, a print shop. And now you've got something you can use forever in clinical. But tell us briefly about the clinical decision card idea bank in the clinical setting. Or you can even use it in the classroom as you're talking about the problem that you're presenting, if you're doing a concept or even a traditional curriculum with your med surg and other content. But tell us briefly about the decision cards.
So it's, like you said, it's just a downloadable PDF that just makes a tiny little deck of cards that have abnormal assessment findings on them. So it really helps students develop some clinical judgment skills. When things go wrong, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And I think that it can be used in a clinical setting or in classroom. And it has assessment data like a heart rate of 160 or a blood glucose of 40, or all of a sudden onset of pain. So you can use the nursing process. We were talking about that a little bit in the intro.
Yeah.
That's not going away.
Right.
What further assessment data do you need to gather? What do you think is going on? What might you anticipate as an intervention? So it really, if students already have a patient with a medical history and a surgical history at clinical, they already have home medications, you can pull in all of those pieces into, why their oxygen saturation suddenly dropped. Yeah. But I think just having them think about those experiences before they happen to them, because you can go through nursing school and never have a patient.
Your patients are always like smooth sailings. They're going home the next day. There's no drama, but it's like nursing practice is drama. And it's like things can change, and you've got to have that anticipatory, and that's kind of something that I've developed with my clinical reasoning case studies, problem recognition. What is the most likely or worst possible problem your patient could develop based on their problem and their reason for being in the hospital or setting, and then look for it. Exactly.
So I think that students need to always be thinking about worst case scenario and what could happen. And because it's always unexpected.
Yeah.
It's always I mean, and if you can start to train your brain to expect the unexpected,
Right. That's right.
you can
You're going to
catch
be that
problems
better of a
quickly.
nurse.
Yeah.
And in the ER, Martha, that prime, that's basically ER practice, is it not?
Yes.
And
It is.
but yet the ER, though most of our students won't practice ER, there is that element of ambiguity and unexpected crises that happen that really ER case studies and ER scenarios are so rich because of that ambiguity. You have to anticipate and figure out what's going on. And so I totally agree. I want to talk and close. We've got about 5 minutes, 5 to 7 before we kind of close with questions. We got to talk escape rooms because Martha, I call you an escape room ninja. And there's escape rooms have been a hot topic for the last couple of years as a really powerful active learning strategy to get our students engaged. And you kind of, have been developing your own escape rooms, but more importantly, you're sharing with educators on your idea bank how to create an escape room. Plus you have a course that you have at a very reasonable price that guides you in some very powerful ways. So I'd just like to tell us briefly about escape rooms, your journey, what you like about them, and how just some very simple strategies besides kind of build on what's in on the idea bank, how to help educators kind of use that strategy successfully.
So escape rooms are just one type of active learning strategy. And that's kind of where Breakout RN came from. Was I had created an escape room in my own theory course. And I noticed in your group, Keith, that there was just a lot of questions about how to create them. And I had made one already. So I made a video of how to use Google Forms to create a virtual escape room, and it has 7 ideas for creating different locks. And I think that it just goes beyond the multiple choice. There's some uploads, there's some free text. So there's 7 different locks that you can make digitally or for a virtual escape room. And then I also just wanted to share how I created the escape room. I had kind of a framework developed, and I just wanted to share that so that others could create their own in-person escape room. So that's what the course is about, creating a more traditional face-to-face escape room.
And Sarah says, I have the escape deck, and she says, love it. My students are using it next week. So Martha, you took an escape room concept and now you made a deck of cards that you can easily kind of implement the principle of an escape room, and you don't have to be tech savvy. You don't have to Google Forms. I still haven't figured them out.
No, this is a done for you activity.
They could do an escape deck. Tell us quickly about that, because you just created that and you developed it. And it's on your website as a product that can be purchased and used over and over again. Tell us briefly about your escape deck.
So this is a done for you activity, and it's small, so you can bring it to clinical. This is the deck, and it's 100 cards. There's 5 patient scenarios in there that are fluid and electrolyte based. And it's really fun. There's a lot of lab analysis, there's patient assessment data, there's some fun interruptions that happen. You have to kind of, at one point, students have 3 patients. It's in an ER. So there's 3 patients, there's ambulances arriving, and
it's awesome.
So they have to make prioritization decisions. And I was able to connect it a little bit to my website with some QR codes to make a little more interactive puzzles as well. So it's a really interactive activity. I've been getting amazing feedback from educators who have the first printing of the deck and have found it very interactive. So
wonderful. And what I really value about what you've done, Martha, is that these are not games. This is not Jeopardy that focuses on knowledge. And, if I were to kind of give an editorial comment, we want to be careful with games for game's sake, but activities that bring clinical realities, that bring those really nuts and bolts skills of priority setting, multiple patients, unexpected things that can change, application of knowledge, those we can't get enough of. And we need to have other strategies. I'm kind of a case study ninja. And so I'm kind of focused on that, but I'm thankful that there's educators such as yourself that are taking some of those creative strategies that are clinically relevant to practice and really bringing in clinical into that reality, into that, I wouldn't even call it a game. It's really an active learning strategy, an active learning tool that brings clinical realities into your classroom or clinical. So how long does it take to basically, Martha, so kind of like with the clinical deck, the escape deck, is that really geared for clinical, or is that a classroom activity based on if you're teaching prioritization or other things? What does that look like?
Yeah, it could be used in classroom or as a post-conference activity. It's made for, or was tested with groups of students of about 3 to 5. I did not test it with any bigger groups, but it takes about an hour to complete, and you don't need a computer. I saw that pop up in the chat, but you can use a phone because there's QR codes on it, so it can load on your phone that way. And it takes about an hour to complete. There's a debriefing guide that comes with it that has some additional application activities, building some care plans around the patients that were in the scenarios, thinking about what would happen if this patient got worse, what would happen if this patient got better. So there's some additional application activities within the workbook as well.
Excellent. One of the, I think Lori asked, is this good for fundamental students? Is it a little too advanced, or where would you find its sweet spot?
It may be too advanced for fundamentals. They do have to have some understanding of fluid, electrolyte balance. There's some EKG interpretation in there that goes with an abnormal potassium. So I think it would be too advanced for fundamental students, but for those who are, in their 3rd or 4th year of a BSN program or 2nd year of associate degree program, it would be appropriate.
Okay. And, Melissa asked, does this deck include some of the, I'll put this question on the screen, does this deck include some of the include some of the objectives and topics that can be applied while using it?
The topic is fluid and electrolyte balance, and
is that for all 5 patients, Martha? So is it
all 5 patients? Yes.
Okay.
So there's a fluid volume deficit, a fluid volume overload, chronic kidney disease. There's a pediatric patient, and there's a GI bleed. Excellent. So those are the 5 patients, and they're pretty universal objectives, I guess, for fluid electrolyte balance, but it does take place in an ER. So you're just seeing these patients for the first time. There's a triage note, and then you get an assessment card that has vitals and a basic physical assessment, and then sometimes you get labs, sometimes you don't.
Okay, excellent. Just like practice. It's kind of like you have to use your nursing assessment skills to say, is this patient dehydrated or overload based on crackles, dry mucous membranes, kind of like putting it all together, that you can't always have a lab value tell you that you got a problem. You got to make an assessment. So I'm assuming you've got some great assessment, practical, making that real.
Yes. Awesome. It just includes a basic assessment, neurocardiac, and I only have a card that's this big, so it's concise.
Yeah. And Robin asked this question, Martha. We have 10 students in our clinical groups. Would this work if used in teams of 5? Break them in half. How could that, do you have to have a deck for each group, or
you may need a you may need a deck for each group. 10 might be a little big, but I don't know. I'm kind of open to learning how people are using it, because I mean, nurse educators are some of the most creative people that I know.
Right.
So I am open to hearing how people have used it or have tried using it, and we can come up with some best practices.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've got people who've said that they already like this, like Sarah says, she has the deck, loves it. My students are using it next week. And so, Martha, even though this is brand new and it's just a very simple resource, you know what, I really appreciate all that you're doing to basically kind of help them to basically make learning active and make it real, and bringing practice into these activities, I think, is huge. And we've got to wrap it up here in just a few minutes here. But I wanted to throw up, I'm sure there are some of you who are saying, you know what, I would like to get in touch with Martha. There's questions I have, challenges maybe I might be facing, questions about the escape deck or other resources or your idea bank. Martha's email address is on the screen, and I know that, Martha, you'd welcome any feedback, would you not? Any questions?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love hearing from other educators. So it can be kind of lonely on the internet. You don't know always how your content is received. So I love to hear from people.
And I'll just say this, knowing Martha, guys, she needs encouragement at times. It's kind of like, at times it's like, it gets overwhelming. You think that sometimes, it's very vulnerable. It's like being naked in front of someone. It's like when you put yourself on the web, it's really transparent. And if you did something wrong, or there's a misinformation, or this isn't quite right, it's like, oh, I just feel so horrible. I mean, and I get that, but there's a vulnerability. But Martha, you're doing a great job, and I really appreciate it.
I'm stepping outside my comfort zone so that others can have these tools. But
that's the essence of courage, is that you take action despite your fear.
Yes.
So well done. And I just want to let educators know that Martha's got her own Facebook group, a closed activity group, or closed educator group, I meant to say. And it's called Active Learning Strategies for Nursing Instructors. And so she's got a great group of educators in that group. And so I just want you all to know that Martha checks it out. She responds to posts. And kind of, again, like the group that I'm the admin for, a lot of love, a lot of synergy, and just, again, educators who are passionate to bring change and to bring about that change with active learning. And kind of let's let death by PowerPoint, let's let it be dead. Let's not bring it back to life. I mean, let's concise PowerPoints, yes, 15 or 20 minutes, but boy, let's not go 3 hours, right, Martha?
I'm in your camp, Keith. I will support that 100%.
Yeah, no, I know you do, Martha. And you're doing it, and you're sharing it. And I just, we're just in closing here. I would just like to know, if there's a pearl, Martha. There's a lot of educators that are new. They're in their first year, second year, and this has been a challenging time to be an educator. It's a challenging time to be a student. For those that are just really struggling. Then that transition from practice to academia. And again, there's not a lot of support sometimes for educators. I mean, I always encourage educators to get a mentor, a trusted colleague, but sometimes that's not available in the way you need that support. But what are some pearls, Martha, that really, if you would encourage some of the educators, just whether you're struggling or not, whether you're new or old, what are 1 or 2 pearls that you've learned in your journey that would be a real encouragement or a support to those who need it?
The first thing I would say is just that it is okay to be a kind instructor. I really believe that. And I feel when I was new, I felt like I was doing something wrong by showing that compassion towards my students, not being their friend, but holding them to high expectations, but also not being intimidating or mean. And I just want people to know it's okay to use that in your teaching and to be that type of teacher. We need that type of teacher to change that culture.
That's right.
So the second thing I would say in regards to active teaching and active learning is that if you want to get started on that path, just start small. Do one activity. There's really easy to implement ones out on the idea bank that don't take tons of time, and you'll see the immediate effects of it. Your class will be more engaged, you'll have more fun teaching, and it will just motivate you to keep going. So just start small, start with one activity.
Awesome. And Martha, I just want to, thank you again for joining us tonight. And I'm just looking if there's any other questions in the chat. I'm just going to kind of take a quick, just look at what is out there tonight. Great questions. He says, could you please repeat what is Martha's Facebook profile? I think I have that still on the screen. So Roshanak, if you want to keep your eye on the screen, it's there for you. And Amelia says this, kind of like you might find this one of the first pieces of advice as a new instructor that I was given was not to smile for the first month so students would take me seriously. Like what? I agree. Be kind. I agree wholeheartedly, Martha. And that really dovetails. I mean, I think in closing, it's kind of like what Cindy Clark talked about, who's written, I think over 100, she said over 100 articles on civility and incivility, the dark side of of just how we can treat each other. But again, we have to role model the needed change. We have to role model that respect, that kindness that we want our students, that as a nurse, we're a role model as a nurse. And so what we bring into our classrooms is what they will be in practice. I really believe that there's a connection between some of the prevalence of incivility in academia, faculty to faculty, faculty to students, student to faculty, that there's a reason we see it in practice. And I think
that's all you see, and that is all you know. That is how you will practice. So I think it is so important to show students and each other that there is another way.
Absolutely. And so I just want to thank you, Martha, for everything you're doing.
Thank you for having me.
You're an innovator. You are a kindred spirit. You're an innovator. And I'm just a blessing to have you here tonight.
Thank you.
A lot of love out there tonight in the chat. So
there are so many nice comments coming in that just warms my heart.
Well, I want you to be encouraged, Martha. You got to keep going because I'm getting tired. I'll be honest with you, Keith RN. I'm getting tired. I'm getting old. I've been doing this for many years, but you're an encouragement to me, an inspiration. And I just want to say thank you, Martha. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart for all that you're doing and all that you're doing to be part of that needed change. And you're encouraging me to do it. So blessings to you. If you have other things that you have in the future, we're going to have you back. And so if you have other things that you come up with, and we've got some ideas percolating between the two of us, we'll share that in the future. Okay.
All right, I'm ready.
All right, nice to see you, and thank you again. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you all for attending. We'll be in touch with you in 2 weeks. I'll be back. We'll have a Facebook Live, and we'll be talking about case-based curriculum, talking about the making the case for case-based learning, and again, bringing in practice into all that we do in nursing education. And so we're going to have a strong emphasis on just how we can, again, just lay the foundation with active learning and the use of case studies and some strategies that you all can take away to be part of the needed change. So thank you again for attending, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a great night. Take care.